I don't remember how I came across 76th Street Station, but it quite possibly was in my phase of looking into all sorts of things about the New York subway, especially involving hidden, secret, or abandoned sections. They may have been spurred on by a mention in a novel series I read in which a subterranean cavern connected to the subway is encountered. That didn't mean I researched this years ago, so I didn't really have much hope of remembering. Anyway, for some reason I ended up researching about the mystery of 76th Street Station. It was a while ago and I didn't remember much, so I ended up tumbling back down the rabbit hole to make this. Firstly, a disclaimer. I am not particularly familiar with the New York subway system, so if I make any mistakes, feel free to let me know in the comments. So with all those provisos and disclaimers, let's get into it. What is 76th Street Station? I'm just going to call it 76th Street, otherwise I'm going to go mad saying station over and over again. 76th Street is supposed to have been a New York subway station on the Fulton Street line, but due to the Depression and World War II, the line was only built to Euclid Avenue, the stop before 76th Street. Or was it? There is certainly evidence that 76th Street was planned. Signal plans show signals for the future 76th Street. Some maps from the era mark 76th Street on the line. On a model board in the control room at Euclid Avenue, there is a taped over section of the board that hides a label for 76th Street Station. Two dead-end tunnels lead in the direction of 76th Street, one sealed with concrete, the other with a cinder block wall. There are several signals facing the walls for trains that would be running from the planned 76th Street into Euclid Avenue, with one almost directly in front of the wall. But just because it was planned doesn't mean anything was built. It is suggested by some forum posters that there could be the shell of a station at the site of 76th Street. The stations from Liberty Avenue to Euclid Avenue were unfinished shells when construction was interrupted by World War II, so why couldn't there be one more station shell? When the plan for the subway route was changed, this shell would have been abandoned. It wouldn't be the only time a subway station shell was built for future plans that didn't arise. This was done under the Sears Merchandise Center in Philadelphia in the 60s. A large concrete cavern was built to house a planned subway station for a line extension that was never built. The space just resembled a big basement, no tiling or anything, and certainly no track. There was no tunnel either. Back in New York, a planned South 4th Street station was also built as a shell, above the ceiling of the Broadway stop on the IND Crosstown. Construction of the ambitious 6-platform station began in 1929, but with the Depression, World War II, and the increasing popularity of cars, the planned expansion was never realised. This is somewhat similar to the supposed story of 76th Street. The key here is both were built along with other construction projects, where the ground was already being dug up, so the current construction wouldn't have to be modified and dug around in the future, and a lot of the work was already being done. There have been no major building projects at the alleged location of 76th Street, so there'd be no need, nor any incentive, to build a shell for future expansion plans. A New York Times article includes an interview with a retired transit worker and police officer, Steve Krukowski, who claims to have sufficient proof that the station exists. Firstly, the model board with 76th Street on it. Also, according to him, after digging at the cinder block wall, he found the tracks continued under it, but he couldn't dig further due to the hole caving in. That he encountered clean dirt suggests that if there's anything behind that wall, it's been filled in. A former colleague of his claimed that in the 60s that wall had a door in it. Through this door his colleague saw an almost complete station. Conveniently, or inconveniently, other transit employees who could potentially corroborate his testimony are now dead. Also, due to his rather incredible sounding theories about the existence of another abandoned station, people have found Mr. Krukowski's claims difficult to believe. The most comprehensive source I could find was an article on Joseph Brennan's Abandoned Stations website. The article includes quite detailed information on the construction, brief operation, and conflicts that led to the station's quick closure. The most intriguing piece of evidence is a photo, described as the only known photo of 76th Street. All this evidence was beginning to convince me, although I did find it hard to believe that a whole station had been completed and put into service, and that its whole existence had been covered up. Still, with all the explanations, and a photo, I at least wanted to believe. What revived my suspicions was an interaction the author reported to have had with a kid who lived in a house whose front yard was a potential location of one of the station's former stairways. A neighbourhood kid told me not to go in there because it wasn't safe to stand on. He said he bounced a ball in there once and it disappeared right into the ground. This was just too much. Surely a sinkhole into the station would have gotten more attention. I was glad of my suspicion when, on reading through a forum on the station, I learned the truth about this article. It's an April Fool's joke. Of course. If I had known more, or really anything, about the subway, or paid more attention, I should have realised that the station was also designed as a through station, not a terminal, so it could never have functioned as the end of the line. Then I wouldn't have almost fallen for that article. It also wouldn't make it a logical point to cease construction of the line, even just as a station shell. Depending on where you read, either the MTA or some urban explorers drilled a hole into one of the walls, and water came pouring, or trickling, out. It's been suggested that the station's planned location is under the water table, which caused flooding, leading to further construction being abandoned, and then the tunnels got sealed off. This is, of course, just speculation at this point. That there's no public records, no press coverage, and no reports of community opposition makes it hard to believe that even a shell would have been constructed. The construction works would have been rather easy to notice. There's also a lack of subway gratings, although any may have been removed during a subsequent street resurfacing. Another point against it is the location. 76th Street would be in the middle of suburbia. A subway station would normally be built in an area with shops and larger buildings, not just low-level residential buildings. The tunnel stub and signals are just the provisions for a future expansion. So there's another thing that never existed, or at least very likely never existed. There's certainly no conclusive proof. And if anything does exist, it would only be an empty shell, not a fully fitted station with tiling and lights and all that. Most likely, though, all that's behind those walls is untouched dirt. That's 2 of 2 in these investigations so far. I am clearly one gullible fool. Oh well, hopefully next time I'll be investigating something that exists, or at least something that existed at some point. I suppose it isn't that surprising they didn't build a whole station and length of tunnel and never used it or properly documented it. As Joseph Brennan emphasises in his notes about Jennifer Toth's book, The Mole People, building a tunnel takes a lot of work. They aren't built willy-nilly, and there is a paper trail created. Imagine the potential headache an undocumented, massive reinforced concrete structure buried below ground could be. I will say, however, while the idea of building underground infrastructure and abandoning it sounds insane, because it is, it has been done. Look at the Cincinnati subway, a partially completed underground train line that was built in the 1910s and 20s, but track was never laid in it, and it has never been used. 7 miles of tunnel have just been sitting under the city with no purpose for a century. Bonkers. One final note. While working on this video, I found an excellent video on 76th Street by Nico BK, which makes this video entirely redundant. Oh well, I've already spent too much time on this to stop now. Hope you've enjoyed this delve into another topic I am fascinated by. Thanks for watching.